Picture this. Your bag is packed, the sun is shining, and your child is laughing in the back seat. Everything feels normal until something, you don't know what, makes you pause. You don't hear a voice. You don't see a warning. But deep inside, something whispers, "Wait." That quiet hesitation. It doesn't always make sense at the time. But sometimes it's the only thing standing between life as you know it and something you never could have imagined. What you're about to hear is a true story. It's not fiction, it's not exaggerated. It's a real moment when a sign came just before tragedy and someone chose to listen. We call these angel signs before tragedy. They come in many forms: a strange dream, a sudden feeling, a voice in the silence, and sometimes they save lives. Today's story begins on an ordinary summer morning in South Carolina. A young mother, her son, a packed car, and a moment of hesitation that changed everything. Was it luck? Was it fate? Or was it someone trying to protect them? Before the worst happens, sometimes the universe sends a sign. If you believe in guardian angels, fate, or simply want to hear real stories of life-changing moments, subscribe to Saved by a Sign and stay with us for today's powerful story. The road stretched endlessly ahead, bathed in that golden hue only late July can carry. Warm, almost sacred, like the kind of light that makes you feel both safe and small. Emily drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting gently on the gear shift, her eyes flicking between the highway and the rear-view mirror, where her son Noah sat quietly, tracing shapes on the foggy glass with his finger. There was nothing unusual about that day. Not at first. The sky above Highway 17 was a watercolor of soft blues, the clouds barely moving. The trees passed in rhythmic lines, and the hum of the tires on the asphalt was steady, hypnotic. A mother and her child on a summer drive. That's all it was supposed to be. But then, something shifted. Emily wouldn't have noticed it, not if she hadn't felt it. It wasn't a noise or a flash. It was a sensation, a sudden and subtle stirring in the air, like the room had changed temperature without warning. The AC was off. The windows were cracked just enough to let the southern heat roll in. It had been nearly 95 degrees when they left Charleston, and yet she felt cold. Not shivering cold, not sick cold. It was something else, something that didn't belong. She reached for the dial to turn on the radio, trying to fill the space with sound, maybe a song, maybe a distraction. But the moment her fingers brushed the knob, she hesitated. Her breath caught, just slightly, a pause no one else would have noticed. The silence in the car felt heavier than before. She glanced over her shoulder. "Noah, you okay, sweetheart?" He didn't answer right away, just kept drawing lazy circles on the window. Then he smiled without turning around and said, "I saw a feather." "Mom? Like from an angel?" Emily blinked. "Where?" "Outside," he said simply. "It floated next to the car, but I don't think it came from a bird." That was when she noticed her hands. They were trembling, just faintly. Not from fear, from something she couldn't name. She forced a smile. "Maybe it was just the wind," she said, though her voice didn't carry much conviction. But deep down, she knew something had changed. Something quiet and invisible had entered the car with them. Not threatening, but present, watching, listening. She turned the radio on finally. Static, then a song. A slow, haunting melody she didn't recognize. The lyrics were soft, but the tone felt like a farewell. Emily turned the volume down. Her chest tightened, just enough to make her sit up straighter. The road curved, revealing a field dotted with cows. Noah pointed and laughed, completely unaware of the strange energy building in the car. Emily tried to focus on his joy, but the chill in her spine wouldn't leave. It stayed. like invisible fingertips brushing the back of her neck again and again, reminding her that something wasn't right. Then came the whisper. Not a sound, not really, but a message. A knowing that dropped into her mind so softly, it could have been a thought, or a memory, or something else. Take the next exit. She didn't know why. She wasn't due for a stop. The gas tank was full. There was no traffic, no danger ahead. But the feeling was so clear it almost hurt. Take the next exit, now! Emily's breath quickened. Her eyes darted to the GPS. It showed nothing unusual. Still, her hand moved on its own, flicking the turn signal, easing the car off the highway and onto a quiet stretch of road that led through a grove of trees. Noah looked up, surprised. "We're not going to Grandma's." Emily swallowed. "Just a little detour. I need a break." As soon as they left the highway, the temperature inside the car returned to normal. The icy feeling faded. The strange silence lifted. The sunlight filtered through the leaves, soft and golden again, painting dappled patterns across the dashboard. They pulled into a small rest stop. Nothing more than a bench under a tree and a vending machine humming softly in the shade. Emily turned off the engine and sat still, her hands still on the wheel. Her heart thumped hard in her chest, but she didn't know if it was fear or relief. And then, the sirens, far off at first, then louder, then closer. She turned to look through the trees, just enough to glimpse black smoke curling into the sky in the direction they had been driving. The sound of more sirens followed, helicopters, voices. Something had happened, not far from where she would have been. She didn't need to know the details. She didn't want to turn on the radio. All she could do was look at her son, now quietly sipping from a juice box, his face bathed in the soft light of the afternoon sun. That night, after finally arriving in Savannah, Emily sat by her parents' window, staring out at the stars, the weight of the day pressed gently on her chest. And in the quiet, she whispered the question that had lived inside her since the moment her hands turned that wheel. Who told me to turn? She would never know for sure. But she kept thinking about the feather and the cold that shouldn't have been there, and the song that felt like goodbye, and the voice that didn't sound like her own, but felt like it came from somewhere sacred. Some might call it coincidence. Emily never would. In her heart, she knew she had been saved by a sign. That night, long after the bags were unpacked and Noah had fallen asleep with his arms wrapped around his favorite blanket, the house grew still, the kind of stillness that feels ancient, like time holding its breath. Emily lay beneath a thin cotton sheet in her childhood bedroom, the one with the faded yellow wallpaper and the creaky fan that never quite worked, listening to the quiet hum of night. She didn't remember falling asleep, only that she blinked, and the world around her dissolved. At first, there was nothing, just blackness, heavy, endless. Then came a sound, soft and distant, like wind moving through tall grass, or someone exhaling gently in the dark. It wasn't frightening, it felt sacred, like being inside a cathedral made of air and memory. Then the voice came. Not loud, not commanding, just present. It didn't echo, it didn't shout, it whispered, "Slow down. Watch the light." The words didn't feel spoken. They felt given, like they were placed inside her chest, not her ears. A breath more than a sentence, a message that passed through her, not to her. And just as quickly as it began, it vanished. Emily's eyes flew open. She gasped, not because she was afraid, but because her heart was pounding as if it had just run a mile. The room around her was familiar, bathed in the faint blue glow of moonlight leaking through the window. The fan creaked, as always. The air was warm, but her hands were ice. She sat up slowly, her breath shallow. She could still feel the voice, like it had left a trace inside her. A knock on the door. "Sweetheart," her mother called softly. "I made pancakes." Emily swallowed hard. "Coming," she whispered, though her voice barely rose above her breath. At the breakfast table, the world looked normal again. Her mother was humming as she flipped another pancake. Noah was smiling, his cheeks full, feet dangling from the stool. Sunlight streamed in through the kitchen window, golden and harmless, but Emily couldn't shake the dream. No, not a dream. It hadn't felt like a dream. Dreams fade. This one lingered. As she poured syrup over her plate, she kept hearing it, not in her ears but in her bones. "Slow down. Watch the light." She asked herself, why those words? Why now? What light? What danger? She didn't have answers, but something deep inside. The same place where mothers know when their children are unwell, where instincts rise without logic, told her this was not imagination. This was not leftover stress or exhaustion. This was a warning. It didn't come with fear, though. That was the strangest part. It came with peace. As if something, had reached across the veil to gently nudge her, saying, "You're not alone, but you need to pay attention." The rest of the day passed quietly, as if wrapped in cotton. But Emily moved through it differently, slower, more aware. Every streetlight caught her attention. Every quiet moment held weight. Every glance from Noah reminded her of how close, how incredibly close, she had come to something unseen. And still, the question haunted her. What was the light? And what would have happened if I hadn't watched it? She didn't know yet, but she had a feeling the sign wasn't finished speaking. 2 mornings later, the sky was a quiet grey, the kind that hangs low and still, like the world is waiting for something. Emily loaded the last of their bags into the trunk as Noah buckled himself in, chattering about the souvenirs his grandparents had given him. The air felt heavier than usual, as if even the wind was holding back its breath. Their return to Charleston was supposed to be uneventful. Just another drive. Just another day. They stopped for gas on the edge of town, at an old station that looked half asleep beneath a rusting canopy. It was the kind of place most people wouldn't notice. A forgotten stop between memories. Emily stepped out and walked toward the pump, her thoughts distant, still echoing with the words from her dream. "Watch the light." The pump clicked to a stop. As she turned back toward the car, a man appeared beside her. He hadn't been there a second ago. He stood calmly, as if he'd been waiting, not for gas, not for groceries, but for her. He was older, tall and lean, with weathered skin and a full head of silver hair. His eyes were striking, a sharp, almost unnatural blue, like cold fire. He wore a faded, military jacket, the kind you'd see in old black and white photographs, with frayed edges and buttons dulled by time. He smiled, not in a way that demanded attention, but in a way that felt like a memory, familiar, gentle, knowing. "You heading far today?" he asked, his voice soft and deliberate. Emily hesitated. "Back to Charleston." The man nodded as if he already knew. Then he looked down the road, almost through it. "Be mindful today," he said. "The road's been restless." She tilted her head, unsure if she'd heard him right. "I'm sorry." His gaze didn't waver. "The road," he said again, quieter this time. "Drive safe, especially when you see the blinking light." Emily's breath caught. Her fingers tightened around the keys in her hand. For a moment the air between them changed, not colder this time, but charged, like something invisible had leaned closer to listen. "How did you—" she began, but her voice trailed off. He was already turning away, walking slowly toward the back of the station, where weeds curled around the edge of an old fence. She blinked. Gone. No door had opened. No car had started. There was no sound of boots on gravel. Just gone. She stood there, frozen. Her heart began to pound, the rhythm familiar now, like it had that night in her room when the whisper came. She hadn't told anyone. Not her mother, not Noah, not a single soul. Watch the light. Those exact words. She got back into the car slowly, her breath shallow, hands trembling as she placed them on the steering wheel. She didn't start the engine right away. She just sat there, staring at the faded concrete in front of her, her reflection ghosted faintly in the rearview mirror. "Mom," Noah asked, his voice gentle. "Are we going?" She turned to him, trying to smile, but it faltered. "Soon," she said softly. I need a second." In the silence that followed, she felt something stir again. Not fear, but awareness. The same quiet thread that had followed her since the chill on the highway, since the dream, was pulling tighter. This wasn't coincidence. This was a pattern. And someone, or something, was still speaking. Emily didn't know who the man was. She would never see him again. But part of her believed he wasn't from here at all. Not in the ordinary sense. He hadn't warned her of a danger. He had reminded her of a message she had already been given. And now, more than ever, she understood. The road ahead was not what it seemed. And when the light blinked, whatever it was, she would be ready. The wheels rolled forward, merging onto Highway 17 like any other summer afternoon. But Emily felt it. A quiet resistance in the air, like something didn't want her to move forward. She tightened her grip on the steering wheel, her knuckles pale against the worn leather, as the familiar road stretched out before her in slow, golden lines. Noah had drifted off, his small head tilted toward the window, headphones nestled over his ears. The gentle rise and fall of his chest was the only sound that reassured her that everything looked normal. But nothing felt normal. Outside, the landscape flowed past, the trees painted in sunlight, tall grasses shimmering in the heat. But it was too quiet, unnaturally quiet, the kind of stillness that doesn't soothe. It warns, no birds, no wind, no movement but her own. Even the trees seemed to lean toward the road, their branches heavy like witnesses holding their breath. And somewhere deep inside her chest, something pressed down, not sharply but slowly, like a cold hand settling over her heart, finger by finger. The air in the car thickened, her breathing slowed, her gaze flicked between the road and the dashboard. Though she wasn't looking for anything in particular, she was waiting for something. "Watch the light." The phrase returned again, uninvited. Not spoken aloud, but echoing in that same place where dreams and memories live. Only now it was louder, sharper, urgent. Emily turned off the radio without realizing it. The silence that followed filled every corner of the car. She could feel her pulse in her ears, louder than the engine. A glance in the rearview mirror showed nothing but the road behind them. Long and empty, stretching endlessly into the blur of heat. There were no other cars in sight, no cyclists, no signs of life at all. It felt like the world had paused, like time was waiting for her to decide something. She adjusted in her seat, flexed her fingers. Her wedding ring, now just a silver band she hadn't taken off since the divorce, felt heavier than usual. She touched it without thinking, as if trying to anchor herself to the present. Then, as the highway curved gently ahead, she noticed it. Up in the distance, maybe half a mile away, a blinking traffic light. Strange. There shouldn't be one here, not in this stretch of open road. She'd taken this route dozens of times. That intersection wasn't familiar. But there it was, flashing. Yellow, then red, then dark, then again, red, red, red. like a heartbeat. Her own heart responded in kind, pounding against her ribs as if trying to answer some silent question. She didn't know what the light meant. She didn't know what waited there, but she remembered the voice, and the man, and the feeling. The temperature dropped again, subtly. A breeze brushed her cheek through the window crack, cool and unnatural, like breath from something unseen. She reached over and gently touched Noah's hand. He stirred, murmured something, then settled again. Safe, still dreaming. But Emily wasn't dreaming. She was fully awake, and the road was no longer just a road. It was a choice, a line between what was and what might have been. She slowed down, not out of fear, but obedience, reverence. The blinking light drew closer, red against the pale sky, each flash echoing the whisper that had never left her. Watch the light. And so she did. The road began to open up as they neared. Charleston, familiar signs, familiar turns. Emily could feel the tension in her shoulders begin to ease, though something inside her remained alert, quietly watching. 30 minutes from home, she recognized the next stretch of highway before it even appeared. A narrow intersection just past the forest line, where the road dipped slightly between tall oaks. She knew this place. She had passed through it countless times, often without thinking. The traffic light here was infamous, always. Blinking, always unreliable. Locals didn't stop for it anymore. It was more of a suggestion than a rule. Emily herself had rolled through it dozens of times. But today, something was different. The light blinked yellow against the hazy afternoon sky. Not fast, not slow. It pulsed, steady and deliberate, like a rhythm, like a heartbeat. Yellow, dark. Yellow, dark. Her chest tightened. She eased off the gas. A part of her said it was silly. There was no cross-traffic, no other cars in sight, just shadows of trees and the long stretch of silence. But another part, deeper, older, told her this was the moment, the one she'd been warned about, the voice, the dream, the man in the jacket, the feather. Watch the light. She pressed the brake. The tires slowed over the pavement. The car coasted forward at a crawl. Then, out of the corner of her eye, a flash. Something massive moving fast through the trees. A shape, a blur. She turned her head, eyes widening. And then it burst into view. A delivery truck, large, loud, far too fast, shot out from the right-hand side, tearing through the red light that should have stopped it. No slowing, no pause, just a steel wall of motion, barreling forward as if the rules of the road no longer applied. Emily slammed the brakes. Her heart stopped. The truck roared past in front of her, so close she could see the driver's wide eyes, his mouth open, maybe shouting, maybe not. The moment stretched, every sound warped by adrenaline, every breath suspended in air, and just as suddenly, it was gone. The road ahead was empty again, still, like it had always been. She sat there in silence, the engine humming, her knuckles white around the wheel. Noah stirred in the back seat, groggy. "Are we home yet?" Emily didn't answer right away. Her eyes were fixed on the blinking yellow light, still pulsing above her. Slow, alive, almost peaceful now. If she hadn't slowed, if she'd ignored the whisper, if she'd passed through, like always. She didn't let the thought finish. Instead, she exhaled, one long, trembling breath, the kind you release when you realize how close you were to something that never had the chance to happen. She looked at her son through the mirror. Still safe, still here. And quietly, beneath the noise of the world returning, she whispered 2 words. Not to herself, not to the wind, but to whoever had sent the sign. Thank you. It happened in seconds, but it would live inside her forever. The truck thundered past, missing them by what couldn't have been more than a breath. A violent gust of air struck the side of Emily's car, rocking it on its wheels. The noise was deafening. Metal, wind, movement, then silence, like the world had been held in place and suddenly released. Noah jolted awake with a small cry, disoriented, his wide eyes searching the space around him. "Mom," he whispered. Emily couldn't answer. Her hands were still clamped to the steering wheel, frozen. Her breath caught somewhere between her lungs and her throat. She couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't believe what almost was. A numbness crept over her, a wave of disbelief and terror that blanketed her body. Finally, with effort, she guided the car off the road and came to a full stop beneath the shadow of an overhanging tree. She turned to Noah, slowly, as if afraid to find something broken. But he was okay, entirely okay. His face flushed with fear, but whole, alive. The tears came fast. She unbuckled her seatbelt and stepped out of the car, her legs unsteady, heart pounding as if trying to burst through her chest. The heat hit her immediately, thick, heavy, and unforgiving. But her skin felt ice cold, like something inside her had been pulled through a storm no one else could see. She leaned against the side of the car, eyes fixed on the road behind. The blinking light still hovered there, steady, measured, like a silent witness to everything that had just happened. It didn't flash randomly anymore. It felt deliberate, as if it had waited for her, warned her, protected her. Her breath came in shallow bursts. Her eyes burned with tears she didn't try to stop. How close had they been? A second? Half a second? The weight of the truth settled over her. She wasn't supposed to be here right now. Not if she had driven like she always did. Not if she had ignored the chill, the dream, the voice, the man at the gas station, the whisper that had lived in her bones since the beginning of this journey. She wiped her face with shaking hands. It hadn't been chance. It hadn't been instinct. It had been a sign, a divine pause in the fabric of time. Invisible to most, undeniable to her now. Emily looked back toward the blinking light, still pulsing in its quiet rhythm. She could almost imagine it breathing, glowing with the same steady cadence as a heart that never stopped watching. And in that moment, with the world still trembling around her, she whispered to no one, and to everything, "You saved us." She didn't need proof. She didn't need logic, because deep in the center of her soul, she knew. This was never just about a red light. It was about being seen and being spared. That evening, Charleston was wrapped in a gentle hush. The sky above her porch glowed in deep hues of indigo and soft gold, stars beginning to pierce the fading light like quiet sentinels. Emily sat alone, knees drawn to her chest, a blanket around her shoulders, despite the lingering summer warmth. She hadn't spoken much since they returned. Noah had fallen asleep early, safe in his bed, the kind of deep, peaceful sleep only children seem to know. But Emily couldn't rest. Her body was still here, but her mind, it was still at the intersection, still watching the light blink, still hearing the wind rush past her window like a warning too close to name. She sat there for a long time, listening to the crickets, to the distant hum of passing cars, to her own breath, and to the silence between it all, the kind of silence that holds meaning, the kind that follows you home. She thought about everything again, not in fragments now, but as a whole. The cold air in the summer heat, the strange song on the radio, the dream, the whisper, the man with eyes like the sea, the words he spoke, the light, the truck. It was like trying to hold water in her hands. Impossible to grasp fully, but impossible to deny. It didn't make sense, but it meant something. Her phone buzzed, gently on the table beside her. It was her mother. "Just wanted to make sure you got home okay," her voice said. tired but tender. Emily hesitated, then spoke, slowly at first, then all at once. She told her everything, the dream, the strange man, the moment on the road. She didn't filter or soften it, she didn't try to make it logical. When she finished, there was a long silence. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, her mother said, "I think someone was watching over you." Emily closed her eyes. That phrase held her in place. Someone, not something, not chance, but presence, intent. "You were protected," her mother added softly. Tears welled in Emily's eyes, not from fear this time, but from the weight of being seen, of knowing, for the first time in years, that she was not moving through this life alone. She hung up the call and looked to the stars. They didn't blink like the traffic light had. They shimmered gently, like old friends returning after a long absence. And then, without planning to, she prayed. Not out of fear, not out of desperation, but out of a quiet, trembling gratitude that reached deeper than words. There were no perfect sentences, no rehearsed verses, just a whisper from her heart. "Thank you for the warning, for the voice, for my son." She didn't know who had sent the signs. She didn't need to. What mattered was this: she had listened, and someone, somewhere, had reached across the veil to make sure she did. The days moved forward, gently and without urgency, as if the world itself was giving Emily time to adjust, not just to what had happened, but to what had awakened inside her. Charleston's rhythm returned, with its buzzing cicadas and sunlit porches, its errands and laughter and soft routines. But Emily had changed, subtly, quietly, in ways that didn't show on her face, but lived in how she moved through each day. She began to notice things, not signs in the way movies show them, not thunder or lightning or booming voices, but whispers, nudges, a tightening in her chest when something wasn't quite right, a sudden warmth in the air when she felt unsure. The way a breeze, cool and tender, would sweep across her cheek at the exact moment she needed comfort, even when the sky was still. She started to pause before making choices, not out of fear, but out of listening, to the quiet, to herself, to whatever had spoken to her on that road. She no longer brushed off her intuition as just stress or nothing. She no longer shrugged off the goosebumps that came without warning. Now she leaned in. One afternoon, as she packed Noah's lunch, he looked up at her with that pure, unfiltered curiosity only children have. "Mom," he asked, "do angels talk to people?" She stopped, the apple in her hand halfway to the counter. "Yes," she said after a moment. "I think they do. Not always with words. Sometimes just a feeling." He was quiet for a moment, then nodded like he understood more than he let on. "Like the feather," he said simply. Emily smiled, her throat tightening. "Yeah," she whispered, "like the feather." That night, as she tucked him in, Noah asked again, "But how do you know when it's a sign?" Emily sat on the edge of his bed and took a deep breath. "I don't always know," she said gently. "But sometimes love finds a way to warn us, to guide us, to protect us, even when we don't see it, even when we don't understand it." He looked up at her, his voice small in the dark. "Like someone's watching." She brushed a hand through his hair. "Maybe," she said, "maybe we're never really alone." And as he drifted to sleep, she sat there for a while, watching his breathing slow. Outside, a breeze stirred the curtains, soft, almost silent, and Emily closed her eyes. She didn't need another sign tonight. She'd already received the greatest one. She was still here. Noah was still here. And love, in its quietest, most mysterious form, had spoken. The season had shifted, Months had passed since that narrow escape, since the blink of a traffic light slowed time and spared a life. The heat of summer had given way to the hush of autumn, the kind that carries the scent of turning leaves and old memories. Mornings in Charleston had become quieter, gentler. The air held a stillness that felt sacred, as if the world itself was listening. On one such morning, Emily rose early. Noah was still asleep, curled into the warmth of his blankets. The house was silent, save for the faint ticking of a clock and the whisper of wind brushing the porch. She made herself tea, lit a small candle, and sat at the kitchen table with a single sheet of paper before her. At the top, in her soft handwriting, she wrote, "To my angel." She didn't know why she felt moved to write it now. There had been no new dream, no chilling breeze, no echo of a voice, but the weight of what had happened and what had not happened still lived in her bones. And gratitude, she had come to understand, often arrives quietly, like a letter never meant to be mailed. She wrote not with questions, but with thanks. She wrote about the strange coldness in the summer air, about the feather Noah saw, about the voice that whispered, "Watch the light." The man at the gas station, the blinking red, the truck that never touched them, the life that could have ended, the life that didn't. She wrote it all, not needing answers, not seeking proof, only the comfort that comes from honoring something unseen, something that reached across time and fear and reason, just in time. When she was done, she folded the paper with care and placed it gently inside her journal. She touched the candle's flame with her eyes for a moment longer, then blew it out. She didn't smile because everything was perfect. She smiled because she was still here, because her son was safe, because someone had watched over them when they didn't know they needed watching. And deep in her soul, she knew that icy chill in the heat of July, that quiet warning echoing in a dream, that stranger with the knowing eyes, none of it was random, none of it was coincidence. It was a whisper from somewhere beyond the noise of this world, a hand on her shoulder, a breath in the silence, a sign that she was meant to stay. Sometimes the universe speaks not in thunder, but in stillness. Sometimes what saves us isn't loud or obvious. It's a gentle pause, a breath of hesitation, a feeling we can't name but dare not ignore. We may never know what walks beside us, but stories like Emily's remind us that love, in its most mysterious form, might be closer than we think. Have you ever felt it? A nudge to turn left instead of right, a sudden need to pause just before something happened, a dream that stayed with you long after waking. Have you ever experienced a sign like this? Do you think it was just coincidence or something divine? What would you have done if it were you behind that wheel? Do you believe angels are trying to guide? Or does even when we don't notice? You don't need answers right now, only the willingness to wonder, and maybe the courage to believe that we are never truly alone. If this story touched your heart, don't let these signs go unnoticed. Subscribe to Saved by a Sign and stay with us to hear more real stories of faith, mystery, and the moments when life whispers, just in time. Thank you for staying until the end. But remember, there are stories that aren't just meant to be heard. They're meant to be felt. We'll see you in the next one, if you're still listening.